Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about another pre-modern deck, pre-modern deck tech, and this is this, this guy. Every time I look at this guy, I can't help but laugh because it does look like a potato. You know, potato.deck. It's Pit Rack, and this is a pretty sweet deck, and it's a pre-modern deck, and it's pretty cool, and it's got potatoes and all sorts of things like that. So let's get to it. All right. So basically, the gist of it is it's basically Pox, but minus Pox. Pox is pretty sweet, of course, but it is like a really clunky card in multiples. So it does like kind of make your decks really draw dependent. It's not bad, but it does feel pretty weird. It might actually be correct to play some number of Pox, like maybe one or two or something. Um, but I haven't tested this deck enough to really get to that point. But Pox is really powerful, but it's certainly not in this deck. It's certainly not stock, of course. And because this deck, of course, plays more creatures, which is, yeah, spoiler alert, yeah, one of the big reasons why the deck doesn't really play it, and it's just, you know, kind of awkward, a little bit too top heavy. But it's the same kind of prison style, attrition style strategy, and a lot of the same lessons and same things I talked about in my Pox style, my Pox deck tech a while ago still apply here, and I really like land destruction, so I would like at some point to test Rancid Earth. Rancid Earth is a sweet card, very good against control decks, very good against Winnie decks, obviously, at least when you have Threshold, you know, so that's pretty sweet. Good against decks with a lot of man lands, um, can mana screw people, that kind of thing. So it's pretty sweet, pretty nice. But yeah, there you go. All right, so here we go. Got a list I created up in that Architect thing. I figured that might be a little bit nicer to look at. Probably should have done this a long time ago, but whatever. You get what you pay for, which is nothing. So, anyways, um, so we've got all sorts of stuff. I mean, most of the lists are pretty stock. You're basically always going to be seeing funeral charms, dark rituals, spitters and scourges and racks, curse scroll, bottomless pit, duress, innocent blood, and then most of the time chain of smog, and of course the lands, pretty much 22, bunch of swamps, waste, factory, and of course a couple cabal pits for just a little bit of additional removal. So yeah, yeah, pretty much. Again, same sort of strategy. Play all this junk out. Play all your dresses and smogs and innocent bloods and all this junk, and then close out a little bit faster with Scourge, Spitter, and or Factory. Of course, you know, you really getting the really good play is, you know, turn one like Rit, like rack. Oh no, wait, hang on. The best turn one play, I think is the most awesome, is turn one, Rit, rack, bottomless pit, then bam. And then your opponent's like, oh no, I'm discarding randomly into this pit. And, you know, and you have like these thingies that like stab me every upkeep. Oh my gosh. Anyways, I don't know, I'm just being silly, but um, yeah, you basically want to get your opponent hellbent, and you want to just start beating down with creatures and things like that. Um, and yeah, or again, use Curse Scroll to take care of things, take things out. But yeah, you got a lot of creature removal, got a lot of discard. Funeral Charm does a little bit of both. Pretty nice. A little bit of land destruction with Wasteland, of course. So yeah, pretty cool stuff here. Again, like if you're familiar with the Pox and everything else with the Pox style strategies, this is fairly similar. although it's certainly a little bit faster with the addition of creatures. But yeah, it's a little, the only kind of wonky thing is um, sometimes 4 Innocent Blood might be a little weird with Plague Spitter and Plague or Skittering Scourge. Um, there, obviously, there's a little bit of a non-bow there, right? Each player sacks a creature. Oh crap, I have a creature. Oh, that sucks. So typically you want to typically, I know this is shocking. You'll want to cast your Innocent Bloods before you cast your creatures. I mean, sometimes you'll get just into situations where you like play a Duress and then chain a Smog or something, and then you're like turn 3 Plague Spitter or something, and then like 2 turns later you draw an Innocent Blood. You're like, well, shoot, but like that's kind of, it's one of those things that does happen with this deck anyways. So it's a little unfortunate. So I could see minusing 1 Innocent Blood to play like another Edict or something like that. I only have 2 Curse Scrolls. Again, most of the time some people play an additional one. That would be perfectly fine. Cut a Chain of Smog for a Curse Scroll or something like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, definitely lots of good stuff here. Again, nothing too weird. Most of these decks are pretty figured out, pretty stock at the moment. So yeah, there you go. All right. Now we have the sideboard. There's a bunch of stuff you can play in here, more than what I have at the moment, but also pretty obvious stuff, for the most part. Again, you'll see these cards in all sideboards of black decks typically, or just most decks even. We have a bunch of graveyard hate. That would be Furnace, Void, and Crypt. They all have their pluses and minuses that are pretty obvious, right? Like Planar Void does nothing if you draw it on turn 3. Furnace is not very good if you, again, draw it too late, although it is better than Void in that respect because you can play it, sack it, remove the offending card, and draw a card, so it's better there. And of course, Crypt. Crypt is just better if you're thinking about curving out a lot. Like on turn 1, 2, and 3, Crypt is, of course, significantly better there, especially for aggressive decks. Crypt is just like miles ahead. So they all have their pluses and minuses, of course. Again, if you are playing Null Rod, you obviously want to go straight with just Planar Void. So keep that in mind. But also, Null Rod is a pretty sweet card, pretty strong card, and one of the reasons why I kind of like to favor 2 Curse Scrolls. So you can just do 2 rods for 2 scrolls in the sideboards, just switch them out, pretty easy peasy. Just having this ability to hate on artifacts when black can't really do anything about resolved artifacts is pretty powerful. Null Rod, a very good card. So big fan of Null Rod, big fan of Null Rod. E-Plague just does tons of stuff. Big fan of this card. Obviously very powerful against the weenie decks, well, the tribal decks in particular, goblins and elves. Has a ton of other applications. Think about Hermit Druid. We can name like human with that, and a bunch of other places too. I guess obviously Merfolk decks, naming Merfolk, of course. So a lot of good applications for E-Plague. Spinning Darkness is against creature decks. You typically only want to play 1 or 2, depending on what else you're playing. Maybe you're playing Contagion or something else, but too many of these can get stuck in your hand if you just draw them at the wrong time. Very clunky, a little bit clunky there. And of course, Negator and Spectre. These cards are basically what you'll want to switch out for like your removal. So they're good against control decks, combo decks that are very creature light or creature-less. Yeah, very powerful there, very good cards. And of course we have Dystopia and Perish. Again, both obviously good against green decks. Dystopia is a little bit more versatile, or less narrow, I should say, because it can hit white cards too. But Dystopia good against things like Oath of Druids, Survival of the fittest, just slow green decks in general. Obviously, I mean, I know, like, ooh, what is Dystopia good against? I know. I mean, I'm really pearls of wisdom here, right? But so, and of course, a Perish again, mostly against something like Elves. But if there were other like green weenie swarm decks, Perish should be good there too. So you're probably wondering, why should you play these Plague Spitters and Skittering Scourge and stuff like that? Well, Skittering Scourge is great, especially in creature light decks, which this one certainly qualifies for. Very good there. So it's a very cheap, evasive beater. Obviously, right? I mean, this, and the disadvantage of like having to sack it when you play another creature just doesn't really come up when you only have so many creatures. So that's pretty sweet. Great against all sorts of ground pounders, things like walls, right? Wall blossoms, wall roots, and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty sweet there. Definitely gives you a nice clock. Plague Spitter is very sweet because it gives you more game against the aggressive decks. So just anything that plays a bunch of little creatures, which is most aggressive decks, right? So that's pretty sweet. Very, very good there. Wipes out all sorts of weenies, um, and it's a clock on its own, right? So the 1 damage to everything, and then of course the 2 damage from the spitter itself. Very, very powerful. Very cool. I like it, and of course it looks like a potato, a rotten potato, because it's spewing the crap out of it. So that's kind of funny. I like that. So yeah. Anyways, Plague Spitter, very good against the weenie decks, which can be pretty good at top decking too when you're both hellbent. So that's something to consider. So Plague Spitter definitely good at mitigating those kind of your weakness to those kind of decks. So yeah, I mean just more additional damage sources just makes you better, right? Against certain strategies, just makes the deck faster in a way. The deck isn't exactly like um, uh, White Lightning, right? It's not going a million miles an hour, but the in the context, relatively speaking, like when you have all this discard and hand disruption and creature removal and so on and so forth, and you get everyone in this position where everyone's always hellbent because of something like bottomless pit or whatnot. Um, it is really nice because you can make your disruption worth more relatively because your opponent has less time to claw their way back out. So that's kind of like been an issue with sort of like the regular Puck style decks where they're just so slow, relying on just like a curse scroll and or a nether spirit or something like very, very slow, very slow. Um, so these are just good. Put some pressure on them. Your deck doesn't really revolve around them if they are removed, so it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, definitely shores up some problems. And there is some flexibility in the main deck, of course. I talked about maybe trying to play some number of Rancid Earth. Like I said, playing another scroll or maybe even two is again a possibility. I've seen, there are some therapies which again mitigate the drawback of Skittering Scourge, which is pretty interesting. That might be something to consider. Some people play Smother over Edict. Certainly, again, these are all defensible choices. So interesting stuff there. But harkening back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, red decks are still going to be a pain in the butt. Don't worry about it too much. For the most part, like again, you can't really beat everything, unfortunately. But if you really, really want to, you can play some Bottle Gnomes. I love Bottle Gnomes. Pretty good, well, very good against Sly. I mean, even if they have like Vortex out, like Bottoms still blocks basically everything pretty well. And if they don't have Vortex out, it just gains you a ton of time and or life. They're forced to remove it. Pretty great there. And of course, it's okay versus goblins too, although they can overwhelm it pretty easily and or remove it eventually. So you gotta keep their stuff down. But buying a little time is good. Gives you more time to find your E-Plague and the goblins matchup. So that again, another option for the sideboard. Yep, that's it. That's it, guys. That's it. You know, that's all she wrote. I mean, again, not a lot extra to say here. You know, certainly a faster version of Pox, a little bit less clunky, a little bit of better draws, right? You know, and that's pretty much the big difference. But of course, just being faster in general, being a little bit more proactive, is certainly a better strategy, especially when you can't really create like a hard lock or something, like some of the other decks can. So yeah, still pretty good, still pretty sweet. So yeah, but that's it, guys. That's it. So thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this, and have a great day.